Welcome to the Village of Bartlett Committee of the Whole meeting for September 5, 2017. I call this meeting to order and once again ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Kammerer?
Here.
Carbonaro?
Here.
Deyne?
Here.
Hopkins?
Here.
Gabrenia?
Here.
Ranky?
Here.
President Wallace.
Here. First item on our Committee of the Whole meeting this evening is under Planning and Zoning Committee, Chairman Hopkins.
Thank you, President Wallace. We have one item on our agenda, the zoning ordinance updates for Chapter 3 and 5. And with that, I'll let Mr. Plonzinski explain it to us.
Thank you, Trustee Hopkins. This is another chapter in our continuing effort to revise the zoning ordinance chapters that are left to revise, and this involves Chapter 3, which is something that we've already amended, but we need to make some changes in Chapter 3 in terms of a housekeeping change regarding language on commercial vehicles, which was updated in our Chapter 4 update. And then also, we're working on Chapter 5, which is the Office Research District. Just basically doing the same thing that we've been doing with the zoning ordinance, is consolidating some of that language into almost a chart format. Chapter 5 previously had some religious land use issues regarding places of assembly. We wanted to clarify that and make it consistent throughout the whole ordinance and be more closely meet the language in the Religious Land Use and Institutional Persons Act. And then, as I stated, we're also modifying, it's a small change in the ordinance. In your packet, you'll see that there's a table for the office research uses, which are permitted or special uses, similar to what we have done. The whole ordinance is only 9 pages long, and we believe that this language will not only make it easier to read and consolidate it, but also make it more consistent with the place of assembly law that exists and that we have to deal with when we cite those types of uses. We've consolidated the table for minimum lot area, minimum lot width, and those types of things, all that were in the bulk requirements, and made it easily readable. Just an example of the lot area, lot width, just putting it in this type of table. Use list, where there are special and permitted uses. That's the sum and substance of the whole update, and we hope that it would be moved from committee onto the Zoning Board of Appeals for the text amendment public hearing. If there's any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you, Jim. I think it's great that community development worked on this and kind of condensed everything. I think it's a lot easier to understand, and when residents want to do something, or businesses, I think it's easier for them to kind of navigate it. So I appreciate that. Any other comments from the committee? So we'll forward this on to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
That's all we have under Planning and Zoning.
Thank you, Chairman Hopkins. Next item we have this evening on a final item for the Committee of the Whole meeting is under Finance and Golf Committee, Chairman Deyne.
Thank you, Mr. President. The only item we have is the potential general fund cost reduction in the amount of $800,000. And I would like either Todd or Paulo take it, please, if you'd explain. Yeah.
Chairman Deyne, I'm going to just open it up a little bit and then turn it over to Todd. I'm very grateful that the board wanted to have this discussion and start kind of our budget discussions early on. It's really kind of a luxury to have the time to have this kind of discussion rather than have it in April when we're doing budget review. So it was a really, I think, beneficial exercise for the staff to go through and take a look at where we could find additional cuts. You know, I think George was reading my notes because I wanted to point out that, you know, we've been making these cuts since '07. And many of these cuts are, they build up over time, and their effect isn't felt until, you know, a few years down the road, especially when you're talking about capital improvements or equipment purchases, the wear and tear doesn't stop because you push it off another year. So some of the cumulative results of these cuts we're starting to see as we go forward, but still we found some places that we could cut. Some of the cuts that were identified by the staff, you know, are not the most popular things, but again, we're kind of at that point where we have to look at really some of the more nicer things that we do that are community building. I will say that the board has done I tried to put in my memo just to remind you of the hard work that you have done. You have reduced the levy. You have cut personnel by almost 5% over the years. And you haven't been shirking your responsibility. I read some of those comments and it just makes me so mad because you've been doing the hard work that is required and you don't get any credit for it. So I just wanted to remind you in my memo of some of the things that you've done, how half of our budget is capital improvements and largely water and sewer funded through the enterprise funds and borrowing or loans, the IEP loans, and the police building that you just heard the update on, funded through the bond issue. So I will turn it over to Todd for the details on the cuts, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so when we finished the last meeting, I sent out to each, mainly Public Works, the Police Department, Community Development, Building, Finance. We're pretty much down to a staff level. We're a smaller part of the general fund. General fund is what we're looking at. The sales tax supports, property taxes support the general fund. Like Paula said, the enterprise funds are supported by sales from water, sewer, but the general fund is what's supported by the property taxes, sales tax, income tax, those kind of things. And so included in the packet is a memo from Police Department, Chief Ulrich, and then some notes. Paula's memo included some notes, and mine included some things on the Public Works side, areas that could be cut. There are a couple of things that will already come out, like the $40,000 donation to the Parks Foundation. That was a one-time thing, so that would be a reduction of $40,000. Community Development and Administration already combined two people into one person for a savings there. Finance Department is holding another, basically, when I moved up, we moved people up and we still have an accountant position that's open, so that's money that we're not spending right now as well. But the memo kind of goes into where each department, Public Works, the Police Department, talked about places where we could save money. And so if you have any questions about any of those details, I could answer them, or I could have the department heads answer those questions.
Yes, I actually have several questions. Wouldn't the holiday lights also be considered as part of that one-time fee, of the $20,000?
I think we purchased. Keep buying them. Are we complete with that?
No, we purchased every other light. I think every other light, Tyler? Every third light. So we did every third light. So we have it in the budget to kind of have a plan to fill in over the years.
To get it all finished.
To add to it, yeah.
Yeah. I was laughing because I know that in my house, you have to buy new lights every year. I don't know how that works for everybody else, but I hope the ones we're buying are a little better quality, but.
Yes, and Ray was very adamant about going down his street, so let's not forget that.
One of the other questions I had was, in our impending discussion with the refuse pickup, I think we had brought up the idea of brush pickup being incorporated into that. isn't that a potential cost savings there that to the village if we ended up going with a company that did brush pickup as well?
That's the first bullet in Todd's memo. It's about, let's see, 2 chippers, 2 trucks, 106,000, and then 2 crews of 2 workers, 2,320 man-hours. So
That's what I'm saying. I mean, if we didn't have to, if we weren't paying for that, it'd be found money, correct?
well, no, we still have to, it'll be built into, well, maybe, yeah.
The residents would pay for it, or we would?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
or if, you know, we've heard from some of the communities that we talked to that have gone out to bid that the companies aren't able to get because they contracted out too, aren't able to get a bid for that piece. But so we might have to go out and bid that piece ourselves. We just have to see what comes in on the garbage bid.
I see.
And that's coming back also in October.
And then one last thing here that I can see. Is the bike path maintenance, is that taken out of the general fund, or is that, because I thought that we potentially had the money in the motor fuel tax to take over or even to do more with the bike paths.
We have taken some money out of MFT to help bring it higher than the 10,000, well, 20,000 if you include the park district, just because we've got a lot of need right now. And what we were hoping to accomplish was having our guys with our paving machine do the maintenance of the bike paths, but because of the brush and because of all the storm sewer projects and all that, we haven't been able to do that just yet. We're still hoping to get it this fall. But so we do have a portion that's in our street general fund, and then we added some from MFT. We can take it out of MFT, but on another side is, you'll see in the capital as we get into that later this year, the road program, we get about $1 million in MFT, and I've run some numbers as far as what that gets us and what our cycle is. 1 million gets us about 2.5 miles of road done every year. We have about 140 miles of road to do. So if you do the math, that's about a 56-year cycle. I'll tell you that roads don't last 56 years. We're lucky if we get 15 to 20 with the roads that we have. So we could take it from MFT, but that means less roads, which means that number gets worse. So those are some of the things that we need to talk about in the future.
I just find it interesting that we were going to find the money to pave a parking lot, and, you know, it just seems to me that we would be thinking about using money from the motor fuel tax to take care of the bike paths, if for that standpoint. Another thing that would potentially not be in the general fund, something else coming out of the expenditure, so to speak, as I'm looking at it. So, anyway, that's my questions.
I had a situation earlier this week, and I want to make this very clear that the sales tax, potential sales tax, is 0.5%. I'm getting feedback that some people are interpreting this as being a 5% increase, so I want to be very clear about that.
I know one of the things that we talked about a while ago and something that you're still working on, very much like the refuse contract, is the health insurance and how that might be changed to reduce that cost.
I don't have firm numbers on that yet. We haven't gotten them back from our broker, but we should be getting those pretty soon.
Okay.
And we'll be able to kind of flesh out that end of it too.
I think if I recall correctly, when we went through our last review of the health insurance or benefits package, the broker we were using reduced or eliminated his commission completely, or at least cut it in half.
I think he reduced it, Janelle. He
Reduced it. Yeah, so there's probably not too much to get out of that.
How long have we used our current broker for health insurance?
Yeah, I think we've used Sullivan, and Paul was our broker there, and then now in the new I forgot what their new name is, but they
Raucous.
combine, yeah.
A raucous group.
So we're still with them under different names.
Yeah. You think it's maybe time to open that up and look at different brokers for maybe cost savings?
We kind of looked at that the last time around, where we had the different proposals from the couple of groups in town, and we didn't really see a big difference. I'd really like to take a look and see what he's bringing back to us before we make that decision, because I think there's a lot of things that we can do with our current plan that not only offers some flexibility to our employees and meets our contractual commitments, but in our discussions with him, I think we found a lot of places where we could make some adjustments and find some significant savings. So I'd like to see those numbers first before we go through looking broader.
When we were doing the pool, didn't we have like a couple of other bids as well? I thought, when we were looking at the pool 2 or 3 years ago, we had some side bids for comparison, and they were local companies.
Paul, is there any way that you would guess on what kind of number that we might be?
Nah.
I can't guess yet.
All right, fine, I know.
That would just be guessing, like guessing.
But I can say that 2 years ago, there were some adjustments made with the benefit levels and a few things to do with the RX that saved us quite a bit of money. So it has definitely been pared down a few times. Just some of the small things like $30 copay or something like that, or a copay with a generic drug that saved quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and there's still some room with things like that, too.
And I know that you'd stated you didn't want to nickel and dime the staff to death. And I've been giving this a great deal of thought. It's a sizable problem. There are some modest-sized things that we can do to help address that problem. The timing is bad. There's businesses that are looking at Bartlett that are probably not going to be excited by a sales tax, even if it is 0.5%. I'm worried about that timing. I'm worried about the, Cook County tax timing. I just think it's a timing issue. I think there's a couple things we could do in the interim to really deal with this issue.
I do have one other question as I'm looking at things. And as big a proponent as I am of the flower baskets, I want to see our corridor beautified coming into Bartlett. But the question I have, maybe Dan knows the answer, how many flower baskets do we have at Bartlett?
At least 40, I think.
Don't know that number.
I'm going to guess 40. There's 2 on each pole.
There's 37 of them, because not every pole gets 2.
Oh.
All right. And there must be a way to look at this watering issue as far as, there must be a way to put something, a vermiculite-type structure that absorbs water, keeps water in that basket so that you wouldn't have to spend the man-hours watering those baskets like you do. I don't know what it would be, but I know that somebody's thought of something.
We already use a,
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk.
Sorry.
We're going to have to start talking.
He's an attorney, not going to
I
happen.
could learn to understand you much better if you'd use smaller words.
It's an insulation.
Sorry about that. Are you taking English as a second language courses or what?
Natural occurring.
So anyway, the baskets are already made of some...
they already use a basket that's made of like the coconut.
Right?
That holds the moisture, but when you're sitting up there in the winds, we haven't found anything that will retain the water and guarantee that we're not going to dry those plants out. So we've been having the guys water them regularly. I mean, other ones I'm familiar with, we actually put irrigation systems in, but
It's a lot of
to do
money
that would be
right.
difficult to do here.
It seems to me that there must be something that retains water that would just, or they have those little containers that you stick in the pot and fill it with water and that empties it, and then you wouldn't have to water them as much. I'm just looking at options that would save man hours. There's got to be things out there.
That's a chia pet.
So, and then $5,000 for 37 or 39 or whatever flower pots seems like a little, seems a little excessive, but what do I know about cost of flowers? Maybe they're that expensive, I guess, but I thought maybe we could look into bringing that down somehow. I don't know.
I have a question on an economic development level. I understand what Trustee Ranke had said about sales tax and businesses coming in being not offended by that, but disappointed in another sales tax. But how much does us not committing to capital improvements dissuade incoming businesses? And does that offset the sales tax issue if they see that we don't have a plan for capital improvements or that we're cutting capital improvements? And do those, what size business is that affecting? Is the economic development of these large businesses dissuaded by us not doing capital improvements, whereas it's the small stores and maybe grocer that would be dissuaded from the sales tax, which weighs heavier on our community development? And I
think it depends on where they're at in the process, and I think the business climate is a huge issue. So I think our infrastructure is not yet to the point where, you need to bring your own bridge. It's not that, I don't think that that's the issue. And
But if we don't continue, as Mr. Koziel had said, if we don't continue to upgrade with our capital improvements, will that dissuade businesses 5 years from now from coming in? And then what kind of responsibility do we have for that 5 years from now? It's a question. I don't have.
I think it's pretty obvious.
Nobody.
We don't maintain the beautification of our village and the way it looks now and the feel that it has right now, you're going to suffer. I can tell you that.
Nobody wants a sales tax of any type. And I think this board has been outstanding. They've cut and cut and cut. But sooner or later, it just reaches a point that, where else are we going to go? And if we cut some more now, sooner or later, it'll become we'll reach a point where it's payback time. And then if we talk about a small increase now, or something now, doesn't have to be this, but something, if we reach the point where services are being curtailed in this village, or because we just can't fund those, then I don't want to be sitting here and saying, like that lady that confronted me and saying a 5% sales tax. Now it's just something small, it's incremental. Maybe we can crawl our way out of it. I don't know. I don't have the answer.
Jim, is there any businesses that have come to you and said if you have a 0.5% sales tax, home rule sales tax, we wouldn't build a business in your town?
We've not heard from any incoming businesses that have said that they wouldn't come here. I think the percentage that we're proposing is still lower than some of the surrounding towns.
Mm-hmm.
Brian just talked about a new restaurant that's coming in, so they didn't say we won't come in with that.
Like Trustee Ranke said, I'm sure they're more
South
concerned
Elgin.
with the Cook County sugar tax.
well, and you and I have been in meetings that he is not.
Yeah, that's true.
The one thing I see if we have to go in this direction, this is not placing the entire burden on the village, on the residents of our community. We have people that come from the neighboring communities that eat at our restaurants and whatnot. So we're kind of spreading it out a little bit, And I think that I don't want to put this burden exclusively on the residents of our community.
Or some other options. I think we beat this enough that we've come up with to shore up this $800,000. I know you guys originally had talked about other options as well.
Oh, we talked about a food and beverage tax. That was the other one that we took a look at. Todd, do you want to talk about that and why we went?
What was the timing around this too, Paula? I can't recall the timing that you need to have.
Sales tax can be implemented it either starts January 1 or July 1. Every 6 months is when the states do it. And so if we pass it and get it into the state before October 1st, then it will start January 1. And then like May, and then it'll start in July if it later. But that's how the sales tax would work. Every 6 months is when they change the rates. As far as food and beverage tax, that's administered by us locally. Most of the communities, they put that on top of their home rule sales tax. That would just be on the restaurants, and it would be they would fill out their forms, send their forms, collect it separately, and send the forms to the village.
The difference between the two, food and beverage tax puts a greater burden on the businesses to report that and to fill out that form and give it to us. The home rule sales tax can just be put into their point of sale system, and it's taken care of that way. So it's a little less onerous.
Yeah. Okay.
But restaurants would also.
I do understand what you're saying, Trustee Ranky.
Restaurants are part of the general sales tax, yes, general merchandise. Restaurants, gas stations, other general merchandise.
Just not food or medicine,
Medicine is exempt, correct?
medical expenses.
I think maybe, I just recommend that there's some lozenges for our village attorney and let the board chew on this for a while. I think
I've
come
thought
back
about
and
it. I have a couple of different ideas. There's a reason why I don't go to Naperville, I don't go to Chicago, and I don't go to Schaumburg, because they're already at 10, 11, 12% on their sales tax. We're at a point where we're in a conundrum. We spent a lot of time putting together a POD for downtown to redevelop it, and we want to now add an additional sales tax. We seem to have a lot of restaurants and bars in town. We might want to consider what St. Charles did, put in a 1% liquor tax. We might want to consider not putting any tax into effect, except maybe an increase in property taxes next year. And the reason I'm saying that is that for the last 9 years, there's been absolutely no increase to property taxes in the village of Bartlett at all. So if we put in a 2 or a 3%, divide that by 9 years, it's a 0.035 increase over those number of years. I don't think that's that big of an increase, but we've also voted to decrease the utility tax. I don't think there's any other taxing body that's giving tax dollars back to the taxpayers. Now, this affects me as well, but I think it's the lesser of the two evils, because we have not only just the residents in town anymore, we have more businesses, and the tax is distributed more evenly between the corporations and the residents. The residents have been burdened with the crux of the tax for the last 30 years. We have businesses, so we might want to consider that. But we can also reduce that at any time we want, or we can raise it any time we want. So the point that I'm trying to make is that if we have to implement a 2% or a 3% tax, we could always reverse that when things get better downstate. Yeah. Those are just the options that I have.
okay.
They're not nice, but I think we're out of options. My company right now is going through over 15 different policies going through renewal. That's for life, health, medical, dental. We've looked at a 65% increase 3 years ago, a 65% 2 years ago, and a 47% last year. The people that we're dealing with said, look at a 34 to 37% minimum, and then 3 days later, Houston was under a foot of water, 4 feet. He said, now you want to look at about an 83% increase. So it's something you might want to look at on the insurance side, because they're putting $100 billion off to the side for Houston because they need to get their money back. And if anything happens in Florida, I couldn't tell you what's going to happen with the insurance industry. But that's going to be a big boat to sail. That's it.
Anybody else have any words of wisdom on the sales tax or other taxes or other shore up from our $800,000 hole? I want to commend the staff for this kind of work. It's a lot to dig in and try to pick out and ferret through the things that you have to attempt to cut as the higher water stuff. I personally would like to go on record as saying I wouldn't want any of those things cut from a village that I live in. I know some of them affect the safety, and some of them affect the beauty, and some of them affect the culture. So I'm not happy with any of those cuts. And I think we need to find a way to shore up the 800,000 in a different way.
Agreed.
I don't know if we have a whole lot of direction for you on this because we have a lot of random thoughts, but
what I think we can do is come back with the insurance numbers and give you a little better picture of that. And just
split the difference a little, see what
the
happens.
difference a little and kind of see where we can push those around a little bit and come back to you with a better picture of what we're facing, and then could just continue the discussion like we're having.
Good.
One last question. The distribution ratios that have now changed with the state of Illinois, that's going to affect us next year and the next year and the next year, right? Because it's a change in the rate that we're going to get from the state. It's going to be a continual shortage because they've taken that money away from us.
Well, the $400,000 reduction from the state income tax sharing is, they're saying it's a one-year temporary, and then it's going to go back up to original amount. It depends on the economy of the state and what their overall income tax collection is, and when they did increase the income tax 4.95%, the municipalities did not give any part of that increase, so they still have our percentage based on the previous rate. So we were going to get the original amount until they reduced it 10%.
So what you're saying is it depends on which way the wind's blowing next year.
No, but
That's a valid question, though. You know, who knows?
But I think each and every one of us is extremely proud to live in our community. I think this board has done an outstanding job trying to, keep everything, in check. But when you start talking about, just the tree replacement, the flower baskets, and holiday lighting, that takes away, to me, it takes away the value of the business. That's why I live in Bartlett. I think Bartlett. Bartlett's a beautiful community, and if we have to start cutting some of those things, it'd be a shame.
Yeah, Mike, I've enjoyed your basket.
Yeah, I love driving down West Bartlett Road.
All right, anything else?
Has staff looked at reorganizing departments and
Oh, yeah.
consolidating?
What's going on?
Actually, that's actually something that we're looking at right now. We're looking at all our processes. Whether or not that makes a big difference in our budget numbers, that's kind of yet to be seen. We still have the same service levels and permit numbers and things, so we kind of have to look at that as well. It's actually one of the things I want to talk about during strategic planning is getting some assistance doing that analysis. We've started, but I think I'd like a little help with that. So we can talk about that on September 26th. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
And so when we come back, we'll have information then, or we should start to have information on the refuse numbers, the insurance, fines, fees,
Those are coming back as
and
well.
licenses, okay, because I know you were looking at
Fees and
that.
licenses, say that.
Yeah, I couldn't say it once, so I'm not going to try a second.
Coming back. The,
Okay.
Parking and vehicle ticket piece coming back to you.
Because if we take a hard look at things like that, then, you know, if it is the board's decision to go ahead with the sales tax, well, you know, we were able to tell people that we really did look at everything and look at cutting things. And 'cause
Absolutely.
I think there's a fair number of people who would say, well, you know, if you don't buy another $20,000 worth of Christmas lights, that's okay. I'm sorry, holiday lights, that's okay. I think there's a lot of people who would say that. I would say that. So,
Package.
yeah.
I wouldn't.
So I think there's room here for us to make some cuts before we go ahead and do this.
I agree with what you're saying. Chairman Deyne, are you finished? Is it?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, yes.
Thank you, Chairman Deyne. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Chairman Trustee Deyne, seconded by Trustee Cameron. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Kimmer,
Yes.
Carbonaro,
Yes.
Deyne,
Yes.
Cabrera,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Ranky.
We are adjourned.